Today on Technado, we'll be talking with Linux training architect Ross Brunson. We're also going to be looking at an OpenPGP attack and find out why people are drinking an Instagram star's bathwater. That's all coming up on Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I am joined today by Don Pizzette and Justin Dennison. How you gentlemen doing?
Word. Word.
Remember, Justin, the people that are just listening and not watching can't hear your enthusiastic thumbs up.
Word.
So you need a sound that goes with it. And
Thumbs up, word.
That doesn't match. It doesn't match with your face right now. So, hey, we got a big day today. We have a lot of interesting stories. We've got an interview coming up with Ross Brunson, who is an author with CompTIA, I think for Linux Plus, right? Yeah, it looks like Linux Plus. So that's going to be exciting. He's actually going to be here in the studio today, not even off in the world. So we're also going to be playing Buzzword Bingo. If you want to join us, head over to go.itpro.tv/buzzword-bingo. Did I say something already? Oh,
no,
was that
I was just
square?
marking my free
Okay,
space.
I was like, wow, what did I say? All right, well, let's head over to our first article now. It's on CNET. Amazon asks FCC to greenlight its internet satellite plan. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are competing in another kind of space race, and FCC chairman, oh God, I always say his name wrong. That guy is all for it. Ajit? Yeah, I'd say
He's the former
first name
Ryzen exec, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was a big lobbyist.
Wait, isn't that
for
a conflict
years.
of interest?
Oh, totally.
I'm
But
just
it's
kidding.
fine.
Oh, yeah, no.
I'm being sarcastic.
Net neutrality stuff.
I'm being sarcastic. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm personally excited about this because we talked a few weeks ago about the low orbit microsatellites and all that stuff. And so if I can get my internet from Amazon included with my Prime account, that sounds like a deal. I'm in.
Sure.
I don't know. This is one of those things where I go, I don't even like the Echo device that's in my house that randomly comes on and goes, "What did you say?" So
Nothing.
I
Nothing
don't
to
know
you.
if low orbit satellites are what I want from that same thing, but it could be. Maybe it's really fast internet, and then I could go live out in the middle of the country.
3,236 low Earth orbit satellites provide broadband internet globally.
Do you remember the days when companies had something they were good at and they kind of stuck with it? Like Ford would make cars and more cars. But now we've got all these companies like Apple and Amazon that are making 10,000 different things, and they've got satellites in the sky. And, you know, at some point...
It's funny, and I will not get political, but I know that a lot of the candidates in the Democratic field are talking about break up Google, break up Amazon, and things like that. And it's funny because then I'll see articles that are like, Microsoft will be like, yeah, break them up. And then it's like, well, until we name you on the list. And they're like, well, not us. But, but you're right. I mean, you've got companies like Google that, hey, you're a great search engine and ad platform and now device manufacturer and phones and software.
And Nest. They bought Nest and all kinds of crazy.
I don't even know how you would break something like that up.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. But, you know, we use the Amazon Cloud Cam at our house. And so I think it's neat that as soon as they get these satellites up, we won't need the physical cameras anymore. We can just rent the video feeds from them.
From the satellite.
And, you know, the problem solved.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of being able to look up and see where my internet's coming from directly. So obviously this will be a few years off until I think we're seeing anything like this happen, but they're waiting for approval from the FCC to be able to launch these, which, I don't know, it's space. Just go. Ask for forgiveness.
I tell you what, you go get a weather balloon and launch the stuff into space and don't ask about it yet and see what happens. Like people will show up at your door.
Really?
Because you can get a weather balloon and put a GoPro in it.
I've seen videos like that, and I thought, oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun, but you have to file. I think you have to file a plan with.
You're supposed to, but we covered this a few months ago. There was the Indian startup that sent up some 3,200 satellites or whatever and didn't have the right paperwork, and they ended up getting like a slap on the wrist. So it's a pretty big.
As long as
Peter's
say,
redheaded. That's not how that works.
As long as you say you're the CEO, though.
Oh yeah,
we learned that last week. Yeah, if you're C-level, then you'll say, hey,
okay.
Your penalty is you now have to file the paperwork that you should have filed before.
By the way, how do you pronounce this? Kuiper.
See, I didn't.
Yeah.
Kuiper?
Kuiper.
Project Kuiper. Well, I'm sure it's named after some historic space thing that we don't know about.
It's the
Is someone? Are you searching for that now?
it's the Kipper belt, isn't it? The
See?
Yeah, it is the
Kipper.
Kipper belt.
all right.
Yeah,
So you say Kipper.
yeah, it is Kipper. I've
It's
never
just
seen
who
it spelled.
decided to spell
I'd
it
heard
like
that
that.
word, but I've never seen it
well,
spelled.
there's two. I'll show off my terrible astronomy knowledge, but there's two asteroid belts in our solar system, and one of them is the Kipper belt, and the other one I don't know the name of. But
Did you know there was a U in that?
I don't know that I've ever had to spell it. So yeah.
And there's
And you
the
use that
problem.
in a
I thought there was like a Q and a silent PH.
Yeah, it's good luck when they say all you have to do is go to kipper.com and sign up, and no one signs up because there's a U. All right, let's head over now to our next article at duo.com. This is Decipher, the security news that informs and inspires. OpenPGP certificate attack worries experts. I'm not even an expert, and I'm worried based on the headline. Is this one of those headlines that's just designed to make me afraid?
I think the font and page layout really makes this page look aggressive and dangerous.
I think the word you're looking for is unreadable. But
OpenPGP, not the most popular thing in the world. If you've never heard of it, PGP just stands for Pretty Good Privacy. It's actually owned by Symantec, but the PGP owned by Symantec is a closed thing that not anybody's really allowed to use without licensing from them. So there's GPG, which is the GNU Privacy Guard, and both of them, they just allow you to encrypt stuff and send it along, and people who have your key, somebody can use your public key to encrypt something, send it to you, use your private key to decrypt it. So you need a way to be able to exchange public keys, in like a centralized directory. So there's a couple of key stores that are available that are considered the most popular ones, and the SKS is probably the biggest one. And there's an attack right now that's being pulled off. It's not like an exploit. It's really just taking advantage of like spam, where when somebody posts a public key to the SKS stores, they upload their key, and now it's available to everybody, right? So anybody can take that key, encrypt data, and send it to that person. Well, if you use somebody's key and validate that it's good, you can kind of stick a little signature on the end of it saying, I validated it. I say this key is good. And the idea behind it was the more validations a key had, the more trustworthy it would be, right? That was the idea behind this. Well, someone, and they don't know who, has figured out that they can start spamming the keys with approvals, with validations. And they found some keys that had over 100,000 approvals. And so when you went to validate that key, you'd hit this massive block of data because it had all these approvals attached to it, and it would cause the program to crash, effectively rendering that key inoperable. And so
it's also like a DDoS, almost like a DDoS for that key.
But it's not even distributed. It's just like a straight denial of service. Okay. They've just found a way to overwhelm that system, and there's no real way to fix it. They'd basically have to shut off the approval process, but it's a standard. It's in place. Most of this stuff is being run on a volunteer-free, open-source basis. They don't have the resources to fix it, and this will likely destroy the centralized key servers, which will basically put the nail in the coffin of any kind of centralized directory of public keys.
Well, that does sound scary to go along with the font. As a matter of fact, Don, I don't think it's on yours, but on ours, correct me if I'm wrong, does that not look like Tempest?
He's got an ad blocker going on.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this little guy down here.
Yeah, doesn't that look like you're playing the video game Tempest?
I could see that, yeah.
Right.
Right. Almost like a Tron thing going on, too.
But
maybe that's part of our problem.
Yeah, it's good that Justin was really focused on the article, though. Like, that's great, Don. I'm going to let you finish, but that looks like Tempest.
It does. I had a hard time. By the way, I don't know if I said this up front. A little sleep deprived today, so it may be an interesting podcast.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But for this approval process, as far as this going down, does this really affect if I have a public and private key? Like I know it puts the nail in the coffin for this public key server,
right?
But does that really matter?
So what it does is it basically renders the key server useless. So your keys are still good, right? And if you have a key with no approvals attached to it, you could manually send that to somebody. And if they loaded it, that would work. But the thing is, like 99 out of 100 people don't use this because it's hard. But for the 1 out of 100 people who do use it, it's nice to be able to go to this centralized server. If I want to send Peter an email and do it securely, I don't want to have to call him and say, hey, can you send me your key? And then once I've got the key, then I can encrypt and send you. Instead, I can just go to the centralized server and say, has Peter posted a public key? Here it is. Let me just download it and pull it. And most of the email clients that leverage this stuff do that automatically. So that is going to break. And so all the automated stuff, all the stuff that's designed to make this easy is on the verge of being destroyed if an attacker decides to do that. The manual side, the hard side, that's still there and it still works, but very few people actually go through that process.
Now Don said automated. Do I get automation based on that?
I think we've talked about this before. I think you get like variations of the words.
Because I just want to say thank you to Don for those last two stories. You said Amazon Cloud Camera. I have the free square. Exploit and encrypt were both mentioned there, so I am one word away already.
I know the word not to
from
say
Buzzword
now.
Bingo, and you haven't pushed anything. Well, I did just say some of those words to you.
No, I would have said more words if you hadn't skipped our first article somehow, which was the 97 VPNs run by 23 companies.
I got 97 VPNs.
So now I've said VPN too. Oh, yeah. And yours isn't one of them.
I didn't click on that. Yours is not one of them. I think that's how it goes. Huh. How did I miss that? Wait, hold on. When I click on that, it just brought up the Amazon story again. Did you put the wrong link under it?
Maybe.
I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, I think you did.
I'm gonna go ahead and blame you for that one.
Let me give Justin a break. He's sleep deprived. He didn't mean to do.
So you were like, why did I open with the satellite story?
I know I had to hunt to find the
Yeah,
article.
so I was watching over it. He was like, what the crap?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Don, tell us about this article that you've brought up by yourself.
I would like to remind everyone that the Technado podcast is a professional production of the. All right, so let me hit this article here real quick. Hidden VPN owners unveiled 97 VPN products run by just 23 companies. This is a question I hear about a lot. A lot of people are looking to use VPN services because they feel it makes their data more secure. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. And then they're trying to figure out whether or not they can trust the VPN companies. Spoiler alert, you usually can't. Now, what happens here is many people are recognizing the need to use a VPN, and not for security purposes, but because they want to access Netflix where they shouldn't be, or they're behind an oppressive government and they want to be able to get to sites they're not allowed to get to. And VPN services will do those two things, right? They will let you get to sites you're not supposed to, and they will let you watch Netflix when you're in other countries. But as far as like privacy and security, those are not things you're going to get from a VPN provider that charges you $40 a year, right? That's just not a realistic expectation. That's like expecting to get an F1 quality race car for the price of a Hyundai. That's just not a realistic expectation. But where it gets worse is some security researchers did a study across VPN products that were available in mobile app stores. So they were looking at the Apple App Store, which is a little bit sparse in this area, and the Android App Store to see what VPN products were posted there, because just any old person can download an Android app and then click connect, right? So these are things that people use. And what they found was that when they looked at 97 products posted by 97 different companies, that when they started tracing back the companies to the addresses they were registered to the support emails, to other things, they found that it really just boiled down to 23 companies, and that over half of those companies were actually based in China, which meant the VPN tunnels that you were leveraging were oftentimes using Chinese infrastructure. So your VPN tunnel was passing you through China before heading over to wherever the endpoint was that it said it was using. In China, they have very strict rules about your encryption keys. The government has access to all of them, which means these are not providing any privacy or security whatsoever. So if you're just looking to change your IP address, they'll deliver on that, but security is certainly lacking. And this was all on vpnpro.com as a part of their blog. You can jump over and read it, and they actually do give a whole list of the companies and how they track them down. It's a neat read. Most of them are not VPN providers that you've heard of. Now, they have advertisements on their website for VPN providers, and I was hoping there would be the irony of them advertising for one of these, but they didn't. But there's companies in here like IPVanish, StrongVPN, Encrypt.me, FreeVPN, Namecheap VPN, which Namecheap is a big registrar, so I don't know if that was a knockoff or actually associated with Namecheap. But a number of other ones that were out there that were just tied to various companies that are all really run by a central organization. Many of these are just white labels of the same product over and over again.
I feel so lied to.
Yeah, it's hot. I'm kind of speechless.
Now, do you guys use any VPN products like this?
So I have. I actually use Express, but I don't use it often. I just periodically use it if I'm like, I don't want necessarily this to be tied to my current location. It makes it sound like I'm doing something wicked shady. But there's just sometimes I need to not look like I'm in a hotel or something like that.
Yeah.
So I use one of those. I had never heard of any of those. So
that's a good thing.
The app-based ones, I always get leery of when they're like, it's an app-based VPN. I'm like, I am distrusting of you in general. So, but you're telling me it's not secure.
Right.
Okay.
Right, because it may be using the strongest level of encryption possible. They usually aren't, but maybe it is. But if the private key has been turned over to another agency, or if they have the private key, which they do, then you don't know who has access to that data, which is, we're normally using SSL and other things like that inside of the tunnel, so that gives us the extra level of protection. But, if you're truly trying to conceal what you're doing, if you're behind a repressive government or oppressive government, then, don't count on this to
Like
keep
if you're
you
behind it, like if you're part of it.
well, I guess there's that side too. If you want to mask your
If
connection,
I'm part of an oppressive government,
Yeah.
yeah,
I need all the keys.
I use
need all-
viscosity. Apparently, that's what Nate, our IT guy, put on my
viscosity is
computer.
just a client.
Ah,
though.
dang it!
You use our own VPN server that we have here in the building.
It's our own thing.
Which anybody can set one up. You can go on AWS or DigitalOcean and for $5 a month stand up a very simple node that's running OpenVPN, and now you control all the keys and that kind of solution. It's hard for a non-technical person to do, but if you're a tech person, there's a ton of tutorials out there, easy to set up.
Man, the one time I actually tried to, I haven't had a scenario where, except for to access things on the network, I've got to do RVPN, but in my own, browsing where I'm like, I need to be on a VPN now. I was over in the UK and I was trying to watch or get the scores from a football game. So I was like, all right, pick a VPN and pick that I'm in America, and they would not let me watch that still. Could not figure it out. Because when I tried to watch the football game, it said you cannot watch this. It's not available
are we
in your
saying
region.
like soccer football?
No,
or
ES,
American
like I was
football?
trying to watch
football.
ESPN
Oh, okay.
through my
Canadian
cable
football.
provider, and they would not give it to me in my region of the United
I wonder
Kingdom.
how they do that.
And so
That would have to mean the VPN is leaking location data, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
that
said
VPN's
pick your
bad.
location. Yeah.
You ever go to IPleak.net?
I think
It's a
I have been
super
there. Yeah.
cool site. The people over at AirVPN, this is not an AirVPN advertisement, although I am a customer. So I don't get it for free. I actually pay. They have IPleak.net. And if you go there, it shows all the information you leak. Here, I'll bring it up on my laptop.
Yeah, here we go. United States, Florida.
I'll browse to it here on my laptop. And I'm not VPN, but you'll see just when you connect to a website, you leak a ton of data. And so here it's pulling up for mine. You can see like my public IP, and then it's going to try and figure out my private, my internal IP, and it should, although it hasn't come up yet. And then it'll go on to show other things. This is all information that you leak out, so it can figure out where you're located. And you can fire up a VPN connection and then go to IP leak, and it'll test and run through and check and see if you're leaking in any one particular area. So it geolocated me here to the building, and somewhere in here, I don't think I'm concealing my internal IP. Maybe I am. Doesn't look like it got it. Well, anyhow, even if you're behind like a NAT router or whatever, it'll determine that a lot of times. So, not in my case.
Well, just in case you thought you were safe, now you get to be paranoid because Don showed you, you're never safe. But this is actually something I've read about on several VPN providers, not just this, is whoops, there's an oopsie daisy or there's a software issue and they're accidentally leaking information. So just something to be aware, even if you are using some of those more reputable VPN providers.
Good times.
All right. Well, let's go back to our next story.
To our article
which
roulette. Who knows what
I think,
article will
I
come up
think
next?
we're on Debian.org right now, if I'm not
there you go.
mistaken. Okay, thank God. Debian 10 Buster released. So this is coming from Debian, so it doesn't sound like a bad thing, but that headline make it sound like it's something bad, like it's busting.
No,
breaking.
that's the code name.
It's the
Buster.
code name for their next. Okay.
Yeah, they always use like people names or like
Stupid name.
Jesse
Dog.
and Buster, and I forget what the one before Buster was.
Aloysius.
Aloysius.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're common.
Alouette.
Didn't roll right off the tongue or anything.
people name.
Debian Alouette.
Yep. So Debian or Debian.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about that before I said it. Is I posted a video once onto our YouTube account, and you had said it, and someone was like, "You're saying it wrong. It's a person's name. It's what." And I know the origin of it, but it still, I feel like, modifies when it becomes a term
it's
like this.
Deborah and Ian,
Yeah.
and they combine the names. So if you say like Debian,
Debian,
and
yeah.
so I usually say Debian,
Yeah.
but it should really be like Debian.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to say
people get worked up about things.
Debian or something will just totally ruin it. But most of the Linux distros today have switched to a 6-month rolling release, which is pretty frequent. Debian has not, and it is just releasing Debian 10 after a 3-year gap. So it's been 3 years in the making. As of a couple of days ago, Debian 9 was current, and now we've jumped to 10. So pretty exciting. Not a whole lot different, but the big thing that I wanted to point out for people if you're rolling this out is that AppArmor, which was supported under version 9, is now on by default in version 10. And I just imagine that is going to trip a lot of people up. For example, if you bring up a web server on Debian 10 and you point the home directory to external storage, that's not going to be allowed by default. AppArmor is going to block that. You'll have to go in and add that into AppArmor. We went through all this with Red Hat when they started doing the SE Linux on by default, and most people's initial reaction was to turn the stuff off. AppArmor is a great solution. It really protects your system. SE Linux is better, but AppArmor does a good job. So I encourage everybody out there, if you haven't learned AppArmor yet, you need to learn it, and it's going to help you to better secure your application. So don't just turn it off because that's what you're used to. Make sure you learn how to configure it. It's not that hard.
So what is? Sorry, I'm gonna show my ignorance. AppArmor. I've seen that in a couple of logs. I've seen it like throw an error every once in a while. But what is AppArmor?
So what it does is it creates a list of rules that says, all right, when Apache runs, it runs as a binary called Apache2 or something like that, right? And then it says that binary is allowed to do these things. It's allowed to open up TCP port 80. It's allowed to open up TCP port 443. It's allowed to access /var/www/html. Those are things it's allowed to do. And then if it tries to do anything outside of that, it blocks it. And so, hackers, they're normally looking for weaknesses in an application, right? A vulnerability that they can exploit. And they're basically trying to take an application and make it do something it shouldn't. If they can take over the service account that Apache's running as, they can start accessing other areas of the file system. AppArmor will stop that. And it's hooked into the kernel, so there's not really a good way to bypass that unless you have control of the hardware. So it's a really high-level security. SE Linux actually gives you even more power. You can do a lot of extra stuff with it, but AppArmor comes with a set of rules for most of your common applications, and then you can write custom rules for your own.
Just to clarify, you said a second ago, hey, Don, I apologize. I'm going to show my ignorance. Are we supposed to apologize before we do that?
Yes. It's illegal in at least 4 states.
Okay, well, I apologize. I should start each show with, hello and welcome to Technado. I apologize for my ignorance. Here's Justin and Don.
Here's Justin. I'm going to have to look into that. That's just something that hasn't, but doing some of these recent interactions with Daniel and playing around a little more with exploiting my own code, I go, man, it'd be real nice if the service account couldn't just randomly go all over the file system.
It's not that hard, and this is going to sound like a shameless plug, but we recorded the new Linux Plus content for CompTIA. It's in the ITPTV library, and we did a whole episode on AppArmor. If you're running Red Hat or CentOS or Fedora, you're in the SE Linux world. In Ubuntu, you have your choice of SE Linux and AppArmor. And Debian, it's AppArmor, and then there's SE Linux packages for it, if I remember right.
Sounds like amazing training. Where would I access training like that?
You could go to the website at itpro.tv.
All right,
I hear they're running a special.
The ads for the end.
Wait a minute. I feel conflicted when you say it like that. I'm like, aren't you supposed to go, good job, Don?
Well, no, I mean, I've heard Don do the ads when I'm not here.
They're phenomenal.
Yeah, they were absolutely. I bought 2.
I feel like I'm being made fun of. All right, let's head over to Phoronix. We're going to stick with the Linux news right now. There's a lot of jargon in this headline. All right, AMD Ryzen 7 3700X plus Ryzen 9 3900X offer incredible Linux performance, but with a big caveat. What?
All right.
What did I say?
In the server world, Intel has been king for decades. If you buy a server with a processor from somebody other than Intel, you are taking a risk. This year, AMD has really stepped up their game, and their Ryzen processors are designed to really beat Intel, not just get them on equal footing like they're trying to surpass. So they're cheaper than Intel processors, and in many, many benchmarks, they outperform the Intel processors. So they're making a big push, and so a lot of people are excited about them. I've kind of just become an Intel guy over the decades. So it's kind of hard for me to switch, but many people are making that jump. They kind of approached gamers first, and now they're making their bigger push into the server world. Some of the cloud providers have already started adopting AMD processors. The big caveat that they found on Phoronix, Michael Larabelle, their main, I think the owner of Phoronix, he does a lot of hardware benchmarking and testing. So whenever he gets a new CPU, the first thing he does is benchmarks under different OSs. And what he found was that the latest version of Ubuntu, 19.04, will not boot with the new Ryzen processors. So there's a little bit of a issue with how it handles some of the memory assignments. There's I think it's like RD rand memory or something like that. It's mentioned in the article what it is specifically. But either way, the current kernel for 19.04 does not support it, and your system will not boot. So that's the big caveat. If you're running 18.04, 18.10, boots just fine. You could try the new processors out. But on the latest version, there is a regression in there that will basically make it not work.
It's funny when you were talking about the Intel AMD world. Like 2 or 3 days ago, a young man in our marketing team, who I can talk about because I'm sure he doesn't listen to the podcast, was asking me how to online trade, because he heard you're supposed to buy AMD now because they're going to take over from Intel. So.
What is their market share? I mean, I've had some AMD processors in the past, but their market share is still relatively low, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see.
They, they were kind of neck and neck with Intel a long time ago, right? And then when Intel released the Pentiums, that's when AMD really took a big hit, because they couldn't release true Pentiums because too much of that was trademarked by Intel and they weren't able to license it. And so they started releasing what they called their 5x86 processors, which were not the same performance level. And then Intel just started making advancement after advancement after advancement, and AMD just wasn't able to keep up. They had their Opteron processors and then their Threadrippers and now the Ryzens. And They make good stuff. They bought ATI, and so they have all the ATI video cards and GPUs, and that technology is now starting to tie into their regular processors to make them better. So they've made some huge strides, and we'll see where it goes. But their market share is significantly smaller. In the server world, it is minuscule. In the desktop world, they actually do make a dent, because like most of your low-cost laptops and stuff will have AMDs.
All right, Don, I just did send you an article, and this is from March 11th, and if you're able to bring that up.
Now I got to launch Slack and.
Oh, you don't even have it open anymore. All right. Well, I can just tell you real quick. In the desktop market, Intel is at 84%, AMD at 15%. In the notebook sector, 87% for Intel, 12% for AMD, and in the server side, what you just said, 96.8% for Intel and 3.2% for AMD.
All right, I got it pulled up on my screen now, so the
if
viewers
you
at
look
home
at
can see it. If you look at my laptop, there we go. Pretty huge disparity there, and this is where they've been calling out for years that there should be antitrust stuff going on, that Intel is doing anti-competitive practices, and Intel is just crushing the market. And this is in spite of things like Intel's 64-bit platform totally failed. The Itanium processor architecture, that's all dead. It's AMD's 64-bit infrastructure that everybody follows now. So Intel actually licensed that from AMD, and they're still doing better than AMD.
And Spectre and Meltdown, all that stuff, wasn't that?
Most of that didn't affect AMD processors.
That's what I'm saying. But it's, I guess it's helped a little bit probably on this market share move, but it hasn't made as big of a dent as you might expect from that. So interesting one there. All right. Where are we now? So we just did that one. Oh, Amazon asked FCC to greenlight its internet satellite plan.
They did?
Yes.
What?
Because that's where
That's
Don
news
put
to
that
me.
link. So we'll just go ahead and skip that one and pretend like we talked about it. It's funny because I had no idea why he was like shuffling before to find that article.
It was
that
borderline
makes
panic.
sense. All right.
But he covered it well.
Yeah, he did. You wouldn't know it if
we weren't talking about it right
if
now.
he hadn't
All
pretended.
credit
I
goes
missed.
to Brad for not pulling up my laptop at that moment.
Just seeing you tab. All right, let's go over to Tech Republic now. Your new Raspberry Pi 4 won't power on. USB-C cable problem now officially confirmed. Excuse me.
Oh, it's concerning.
It is concerning. It's good. We talked about this new Raspberry Pi a few weeks ago, and I know. I mean, Justin, you play with those sometimes, right?
I do. I don't have a 4.
Good.
Well, I mean, they just came out last week.
Yeah,
right?
they did. But as soon as they came out, I like YouTube and various other outlets. Like it just started going, "Hey, Justin, would you be interested in watching an unboxing?" I'm like, "Not really. I mean, I read about it. It was on the podcast." But when I saw that it was USB-C, I know the trouble that we had for our USB-C based laptops, like getting them to show on monitors and things. I was like, "Huh. I wonder if that's going to be an issue."
Now,
well,
is that the
so
charging?
happens that yes, it is.
Yep.
Is it like on the MacBook where they're using that as data as charging as all different
So
things?
I think on here it's just
power.
charging.
Yeah,
it's
just
just power.
It replaces the micro USB, right?
Right.
And then it's micro HDMI that does video and stuff, which is odd. They could have used USB-C, but apparently there's cable problems, so maybe that was a good choice.
Yeah, it's funny. If you look at the photo of the thing, the biggest things on that are just the connections to external devices. So, so the problem is basically you're not going to get power to it right now. So what are they doing? A recall?
Well, so what's happening here, and we kind of reported last week on how this thing came out 6 months ahead of schedule. And so now people are saying, well, you could have used an extra month or two to test out a few edge cases. But what's going on is you use USB-C to plug into this thing and charge it up. And you need a charger that provides 5.1 volts and 3 amps. Now, 3 amps is a little high. And if you think about most cell phone chargers, they're not running at 3 amps. They're usually like 1 amp or 1.5 amps. So already, and this was true with the Raspberry Pi 3 as well, that there's a lot of phone chargers out there that just don't provide the right voltage. So that's a problem they have. Well, even if you have one that provides the right voltage, if it's a USB-C smart charger, so we're getting a little specific here, it's got to be a USB-C smart charger. Some smart chargers, not all, but some of them, are seeing the Raspberry Pi as an audio device and not as a computer. And so when they see it as an audio device, they send a lower amount of amperage because that's all like a set of headphones would need. And so it's not getting enough power and it won't turn on. And this is a hardware problem. It's a problem with the identifier and the way it's sharing that information. If you were to use a like USB-A to USB-C cable, that breaks the smart charger part, and then it provides the right voltage, and you go. So you can kind of work around it. And some smart chargers actually just aren't smart, and they don't recognize what the device is, and so they provide whatever voltage it asks for. So it's not affecting everybody. Most people are able to power theirs on, but the bigger problem here is that they can't fix this with a software update. They're going to have to make a hardware change, and so now there's going to be 2 different Raspberry Pi 4s, pre-power charger screw up and post-power charger screw up, but it can all be solved with a simple adapter change.
But that's one of those things. This has kind of been pursued. I bricked my first Raspberry Pi, my B Plus, because I was using a wrong charger. It didn't get enough voltage. It like cycled power a couple of times. Things got weird, and now it just goes. I mean, I kept it for
Posterity.
Parts, yeah.
But I was like, well, I was just like, look at you, you nice little paperweight. But I learned my lesson for my 2s and my 3s that I bought. I actually bought powered USB hubs that guarantee each port has, I think, up to 2.5 amps of power draw. That way I could have multiple ones that were running, and I knew that I was supplying the appropriate amount of power.
Yep. Or for the massive sum of $8, you can buy the official Raspberry Pi charger, and then you don't have to worry about it.
So just to clarify, I know these things are inexpensive, and I've never purchased one. Does it not come with a cable and a charger?
Usually it's very bare
No.
bones.
Okay.
Yeah. No case, no cable. I don't know about SD cards anymore. I know it used to not come with SD cards whatsoever, but it was $35.
No, yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that just means people were getting it, plugging it into whatever charger they had at home, and that's when they run into
that was kind of
issues.
causing the issues. Also, like SD cards, you pick the wrong class SD card, and then you're like, wow, this thing is wicked slow, and it's because your storage is slow. So there are some issues, but a relatively inexpensive platform to get started. Actually, with a Linux-based computer to play around with. So
Yeah,
pretty fun.
they're great pieces of hardware. I use them for all sorts of things.
But you haven't gotten the new one yet, either of you?
No, I just recently got some 3. I haven't had time to play with the 3s I bought. So yeah.
All right, well, let's get back to the news. Next up, Amazon asked the FCC to greenlight its... I'm sorry, that's just... doesn't get old.
Yeah, it hasn't.
get
But
old.
but what was that? I hadn't heard about that before.
You are tired. All right, we're going to head over to Forbes now. Microsoft issues a warning for 50 million Windows 10 users. Windows 10, we've been talking about problems they've been having for the last few weeks.
So they issued a warning about an upcoming update that might break their stuff?
Well,
This one's going to be bad.
all right, I want to float out a theory here, and you guys know I have my various predictions, which are largely wrong and have not been proven. But I am under the impression right now that the Forbes is on an attack campaign against Microsoft. Because there have been a couple of articles, and Forbes, that's a reputable source. I certainly don't mind citing them here on the podcast. But lately, they keep posting these warnings, and when you start digging into it, you find out that the headline was super misleading. And this one, Microsoft issues warning for 50 million Windows 10 users. That's not true. On the face of it, Microsoft didn't issue a warning at all. There's a TechNet bug article that says that always-on VPN clients, many of them are not triggering right when your system fires up. So they're not always on. You have to manually trigger it to launch it. So it's kind of a bug. They're working on and fixing it. And what Forbes is doing is they're saying, all right, how many Windows 10 users are there? And they're trying to figure out an estimate. And so their reasonable estimate is there's 50 million Windows 10 users. But the reality of this is you have to be running Windows 10 1903, that specific build. You have to have a always-on VPN client installed. And if you meet those criteria, this probably affects less than 100,000 people, right? Because even the VPN clients from the major providers are not affected. So if you have Cisco AnyConnect, it's not affected. Many of the open VPN clients are not affected. It's strange. So it sounds like a huge warning we need to go and evaluate, but in reality, it affects very, very few people.
Well, what's interesting, too, is they walked it back. In the second paragraph, it says, update, my thanks to Microsoft, which clarified, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As such, the potential fallout from it will be significantly smaller than I originally understood. But I'm not going to change my headline, apparently, is the position they're taking.
I did not see that update. That's awesome.
So
that wasn't on there when I first clicked this. Yeah.
I'm kind of confused. The numbers further down don't match. It goes Windows 10 1903 accounted for 6.3% of all Windows 10 computers in June, 50.4 million. But that makes it seem like Windows 10 computers are 50.4 million. Am I reading that wrong? If 6% of 50 million is not 50 million,
it is less.
Yeah.
No, I think they're saying 6% of the total Windows
is
install
50
base.
million?
No, and they don't give us that number, but that number is significantly higher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, hold on a second. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, here, 800 million computers worldwide.
Okay.
So 6%.
Yeah, that would be
of-
50 million. Yeah.
So either way, this is kind of a non-issue. And there was another one that I didn't throw in the podcast today, but that was posted a day before this one that was also kind of full of inaccuracies. So I'm starting to get a little suspect. I need to look and see if it's the same author every time. But anyhow, I'm going to start using hashtag sensationalized. And I think this one, it totally falls under that.
Wait a minute. Did you just say you're going to start using hashtags?
I am.
Yeah, he's been tweeting.
Cherokee told me I have to go like this when I say hashtag.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hash brown. So this is probably why Steve Forbes never made it out of any of the primaries.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there you go.
He probably has Apple stock or something like that that's making him go, hey, guys, write that article.
He's a bazillionaire, and here I am.
They're out to get him. I hear it. Rawr.
All right. Next up over at zdnet.com, Canonical GitHub account hacked, Ubuntu source code safe. Ubuntu source code appears to be safe. However, Canonical is investigating. So it's kind of like a headline that goes one way, and then the subheadline's like, but not really, but maybe.
Yeah, it's usually the other way around. Because it's safe, that would make you say, I don't need to read the article. And then they stick on the end, well, actually.
Or is it?
You could be screwed.
Yeah. Oh, no.
So Canonical, the company that makes Ubuntu and manages Ubuntu, had what I consider like a nightmare scenario where unauthorized people got access to your GitHub account, which includes all your source code. Now, for an open source company, I guess the risk is significantly lower because you publish your source code. So it would be if somebody got in there and modified it versus if it was like Microsoft's repositories, they could get closed source code and release it. That would be a bigger debacle. But what they're saying so far is they showed where somebody put in a few unauthorized pull requests and that's about it. Like, they haven't been able to find anything truly significant yet, but it's something to keep an eye on. Somebody getting access to your repositories, into your, I mean, any of your code management is a big deal, and can be dangerous, because imagine if somebody were to bake a backdoor into Ubuntu. So you're getting the official install image from an official mirror. It's passing its hash checks, so it shows it being unmodified, and the backdoor is already in it. That's the type of scenario that could be set up here. So I am certain that a company their size has full auditing in place, and they'll be able to look and see. And I think they even mentioned in the article that their build servers weren't compromised. It was just the GitHub repository that draws from the build server, so that nobody was actually able to change the builds.
It says that there were 11 empty repositories created in their GitHub account as well. There was nothing in them. But what was interesting, and actually this makes me kind of want to go look through my GitHub to see if there's any shenanigans. There was a internet-wide scan for Git configuration files from some unknown actor, I guess, looking for configuration files in a Git repository that could leak credentials to let you gain access. So that's not necessarily directly related to Canonical, but that makes me go, I wonder if they're just happenstance. Like, are there other things that we're going to see slowly leak out where, hey, our GitHub got hacked too? So just be aware. By the way, GitHub does have features that if you log in from an unauthorized location, it'll like spam you with like text messages and stuff like that. So if you don't have that turned on, you may want to turn that on.
Interestingly, the scans were coming from Ireland, not North Korea or China, or all the people that we normally throw out on these things.
Maybe they got their VPN location thing to work.
Yep.
Unlike me.
I was like, VPN.
That's probably it.
Or the win.
But to clarify, and I know we've talked about GitHub in the past. We did a couple shows on that in the past. But you can roll back, right? So the old data is still there. I mean, if something were to happen.
Yeah. If you detect it, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't detect it, that's
you don't know when the change happened.
So I think the nightmare scenario here is, like people hacking a Git. You typically can roll back in history, but if their build servers got compromised or anything like that, and bad things got pushed forward, right, into the wild, that would be hard to remediate against, right? Hard to get back.
Don's paying attention here. He just
checked off
his
one
first
word.
thing.
Yeah.
We've said all these things, and he's not. Just look at our cards periodically.
I know, I'm screwed.
Because, a lot of things you just say, and then we go, well, that's interesting, Don. Check.
Yeah, but having it released, like going through a build process and like a binary or an ISO or something getting pushed out, I think would be the bigger issue here, because you just go, delete that pull request and get rid of that commit, and we're all good to go. No harm, no foul.
What about Docker?
This is obviously a good place for Docker to fix it.
I hear Docker solves all problems.
Yep.
I was just trying to see if you guys
I hear
would
the way
say
that
the word I needed.
The way that it compartmentalizes applications in a way that they don't have access to the underlying infrastructure is amazing.
Yeah, it's like the things that they use to to ship cotton
What are they called?
and
Segmenters?
goods. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Fences. They're called fences.
Dang it. I'll get you. I'm looking at the articles coming up going, nope. This interview better be good. All right. Let's head over to The Verge now. Zoom fixes major Mac webcam security flaw with emergency patch. The company is now removing local Mac web servers. And so this is something that could affect us here using both Macs and Zoom in our office. Have we been hacked?
And I would like to point out that when you say us, you mean you and Justin. I'm unaffected by this.
I've got this little sticker thingy over my webcam, so nice try.
Seriously, if they look at me, all they're going to see is me going, that does not work. Look at that. It's broke. Broke again.
Now people can see me at home on my Foscam and at work with my Zoom on Mac.
So Zoom, the video conferencing and VoIP solution platform that tons of companies use, including ITPTV, they had a problem, right? Their problem was that if you were using Safari and you browsed to a web page and clicked on Join a Zoom Conference, it would pop up a box saying, do you want to allow this page to launch an application? Then it would pop up another box, and you have to say, yes, launch the application, and you go. People had to click twice, and that's a problem. And so they solved that problem by saying, you know what? When you install Zoom, if we launch a web server in the background and open up a port, and somebody clicks on a join a meeting link in a browser, instead of trying to access hardware, which triggers the security prompt, we can have it just talk to that web server, and initiate the conference and take us right in and, start up a microphone and camera and off you go. Users only have to click once. That's awesome. The problem was attackers only had to click once. That web server would stay running, and in fact, it would stay running even after you uninstalled the Zoom conferencing software. And an attacker could then send a particularly crafted packet to that web server and connect your webcam, connect your microphone, and basically put you into a conference without you even knowing it. And the default in Zoom was to connect with the camera and microphone activated. They're changing all of this now. So Zoom's already pushed out a patch where, they already had made where you could set it where the camera was off by default. That just wasn't their default setting. So they're fixing that. They're removing the web server. Users will have to click twice to join a conference now. So they're kind of backpedaling on all this. But initially, when a security researcher disclosed this to them, they said it was more important to them that people just click once than it was to patch this flaw. And so the security researcher released it, and now they fixed it, and they said that privacy is their utmost concern once it's known that we're not protecting privacy.
Oops is the big oops there. And this is one of those things, Zoom has done this, but I've seen other software that does a similar thing. Like there's a server running in the background that's listening for some kind of message or packets or requests, and they use it as a service for going out and like interacting with a bunch of things. So this is bad for them. Like it's not, well, when you said if you go to Safari, I was like, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that. I can't remember the last time I opened Safari. Does this affect other web browsers?
I'm glad that you asked. So
Sounds like a setup.
I forgot about this. So they did this to save a click in Safari, right? But even if you don't use Safari, you installed Zoom, the web server comes up, you're vulnerable. So don't. I should have stated that earlier. So it's not just if you use Safari, because nobody does. Safari's stupid. But if you use Chrome or if I'm trying to be,
It's like the IE of Macs.
It really is. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So if you're running Chrome or Firefox or whatever, it doesn't matter because it's the web server that causes the problem. And it was just worse that if you uninstalled the Zoom client, the web server stayed behind. So they've fixed that. We've seen this before with other things like Node.js. Tons of applications will install their own copy of Node and leave it behind, and you have these non-updated versions floating around. They're able to execute things. It's a common problem. So Zoom is just the latest one. If you had proper firewalls in place, which I think most people do at this point, it's not like an outside attacker could get to it, but an inside attacker could, or if they were leapfrogging to get in your network, or if you were on a untrusted network like a hotel, someone in a different hotel room could possibly trigger that on your machine. That's the type of risk that you have here.
All right, so end of the day, if you're using Zoom on a Mac, just make sure you have that latest patch installed there. You should be good to go.
It. Well, the latest patch makes it where you can turn off your camera by default. And to my knowledge, the patch that removes this stuff isn't out just yet, because this all just broke yesterday. So in the next couple of days, we're supposed to see the bigger patch.
So hopefully by the time you're hearing this, there's a patch.
Hopefully.
So patch it. All right, let's head over now to zdnet.com. Logitech wireless USB dongles vulnerable to new hijacking flaws. Vulnerabilities found in Logitech's proprietary unifying USB dongle technology. How is dongle not a buzzword?
Yeah, I don't know.
Probably should be. We mention it every week.
Yeah.
Although I do want to fess up and be honest here. A moment ago when I said the Zoom vulnerability only affected you guys and not me because I'm not running a Mac,
look at
I have my
dongle.
Logitech dongle right here, and it's totally affected by this vulnerability.
Is that a Logitech?
Yeah, his
this-
trackball
that's
guy. I thought you were talking about the...
Yep, because I have a Logitech keyboard and
Right.
trackball right here. I also have them on my home computer, and
My
so
Logitech thing is plugged into my USB.
So when you're back at your desk, you're
I'm
double vulnerable.
Not vulnerable here.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it's plugged into my Foscam. And I was like,
Can you
well,
plug
there
it
you go.
Or if you need it, I have like 3 more of the Logitech dongles over there in my cabinet from all the Logitech crap I bought over the years. But the Logitech unifying key is designed for you to be able to connect keyboards, mice, and a handful of other devices to your computer. And that means any keystroke you type or mouse movement is traveling across that wireless signal. It's a proprietary technology that Logitech created. It's not
They're
Bluetooth.
capturing my keystrokes?
And that's what they did.
What?
So the problem is they did a what's the best way to put this? A crap job at security. And apparently, when you plug in the key, there's a brief moment where it's effectively transmitting the private key out. And so an attacker who's there when your key is being plugged in can get the private key, right? And that means if you're not even there, like somebody could come into my office while I'm not here, even if the screen is locked, and just unplug the key and plug it back in, and then they can capture that private key. And once they've got that, at any point when they're within the 30 feet or whatever my range is, which means they could be on the outside of that window that's closed right now, and they would be able to capture my keystrokes. So every key that I type would then be intercepted. And I actually have keylogger protection on my laptop. That wouldn't matter because they're intercepting the wireless signal between the keyboard and the laptop. Your software doesn't even have a chance to act on it at that point, and they could see your typed password and so on, which is why MFA is such an important thing. Multi-factor authentication, which I guess is on all you guys' cards. That way, if somebody intercepts your password, they would still need this other one-time password or OTP to be able to gain access to it. So big vulnerability. Logitech does, I believe they are working on the update. They released a patch that was supposed to fix this, but the security researchers showed where it didn't completely fix it, and Logitech said they were done, and so that's why they've announced their findings. They went through responsible disclosure. So we'll see if Logitech does the rest of it to patch the rest of the way.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, what was the impetus of, like, we need to throw that private key out there. That's kind of like me walking in the bank, and as soon as I hit the door, I go, my account number is...
routing number.
And go, now that we've got that out of the way, I need to make a withdrawal.
Yeah.
Right?
Privately.
Well, the main problem here is that key exchanges are hard.
They are.
And so, doing like a Diffie-Hellman key exchange for your trackball is not an easy thing to do. And so when they try and develop things in-house, proprietary things, it's going to have problems like this. Bluetooth is actually very secure now. It wasn't in the beginning, but it's had tons of companies pouring over the code and reviewing and stuff. The proprietary Logitech technology has not had that benefit. And in this case, it's weak.
Well, I would say all that I see out the window is one suspicious-looking squirrel. So
with a laptop.
Yeah.
I believe you mean tree rat?
Yes, they are tree rats. They're the tweakers of the animal world.
All right. Are we ready to move to our hard journalism for the day?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great lead-in for our interview guest here. All right, so this one is over at insider.com. We're going to do 3 rapid-fire stories that all kind of connect here. We're going to follow the story for you. First, an Instagram star put her own bathwater up for sale for $30 a bottle, and it sold out in 3 days. So this is Belle Delphine, and she's got in the photo there, you can see boxes of water, boxes of containers of human soup. Thank you. It's a good term for it. And they sold out within 3 days. A lot of people were disgusted by this,
as they should be.
But that didn't stop the others from purchasing it. And then what's amazing here is, as we read through this a little bit, people then chose to do things with that water. Some drank it, and then some, in what we determined earlier was the most millennial thing you could do, vaped it, because I guess it'll just turn it into a water vapor there. And
I guess
I do feel compelled to say, if you're listening, you're like, who is this? And you type this in and you're at work. There are some not safe for work stuff that are associated with this individual. So just FYI, there's your warning. Also, yeah, he did say someone vaped her bathwater. So I just want to reiterate that as well.
So, Justin, we have an update on this story right now.
Oh, really? What?
Coming to us from hitc.com, Belle Delphine, it's probably like Belle Delphine or something, and I'm just saying it horribly, responds to allegedly giving over 50 people herpes. Did you know that by drinking or vaping bathwater, apparently you can get herpes?
What kind of herpes do you get when you vape?
Is there science behind this?
Is it lung herpes?
I don't know.
Remember when the social media influencers were people like Mark Shuttleworth, and Steve Wozniak, and now it's whoever the hell this is.
How quickly can herpes manifest itself in one's self?
I don't know. I mean, it's incredibly virulent, and it.
I'm sorry to cut you off. We're getting breaking news now from the dailydot.com. No, people are not getting herpes from drinking Belle Delphine's bathwater. So she has weighed in on this as well.
And she's serious because she doesn't have pink hair.
Yeah.
In this
photo. That's just in this photo.
I thought this was her official press release hair.
But she does look more regular there.
There was a weird pause there.
Yeah, I didn't know what words to
All right,
use.
now I'm going to fess up to something. I normally do a great job of making sure that I pre-read all of our articles and do my research. I did not read any of these articles.
Headlines are fine here.
Are there any quotes from scientists anywhere in this stuff?
Scientists. Let's see.
Does Snopes count?
Did Snopes reference a
So
scientist?
Snopes
Oh,
is like, so Daily Dot is saying Snopes said, no, that could not happen.
Did you go over to Snopes?
No, actually, I'm getting ready to go there now. So
Okay, yeah, 'cause Snopes is reputable.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we'll take that. But
Snopes
they're not
fact check.
scientists, so hopefully they have to reference somebody. They do fact checking on a lot of different things, so I'd trust them, I suppose. Anyhow,
Snopes says that
they give no justification on the Snopes website. It just says false. Like that's their determination on the Snopes website.
and that's it.
yeah,
Just
it's like
stupid.
false. No one was dumb enough to drink that, right? So
Yeah, well, people are dumb enough, and this is why it's so important to get a good education. It really is.
Y'all watched The Water Boy, right?
Yes.
You remember that scene where he goes, which reminds me, kids, don't smoke. And I feel like this is one of those moments. Remind me, kids, don't drink bathwater
or vape it.
or vape it.
Because we don't know which way people potentially, allegedly, did not get herpes from this.
I'm just wondering, like, how many of those containers spilled in shipping?
Oh my gosh! I know you're not allowed to sell or to ship like fluids and
Would this count?
stuff. Does this count? I don't know.
I think she broke a law.
Liquids or gels? You have to put it in your check bag too.
All right. Well,
Anyway, I'm sorry.
social
Yeah.
media influencers are right on the edge of IT. So let's jump back. We've got an interview, don't we?
Yeah, Ross Brunson. He's an Instagram star. No, he's not.
No.
He may be, but we have him in town here doing some videos for CompTIA, where he works as an author as well, working on their Linux Plus LPIC 1 cert guide. So let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we will come back right here with Russ on Technado.
CompTIA and IT Pro TV are hitting the road next month, and you can be part of the journey. We'll be dropping by offices across the U.S. with food, drinks, and swag to celebrate IT pros like you. IT doesn't only happen in big cities and large corporations, so we'll be making visits to smaller towns and offices too. Who will we meet? Where will we stop? You can find out by following IT Pro TV on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to track the route and catch video recaps of each day. It's the road to ChannelCon 2019 from CompTIA and IT Pro TV. We'll see you soon.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Technado. And as promised, we're here in studio. We've kicked out Peter. So, our quality level has remained unchanged. And we've brought in Linux training architect Ross Brunson, who is amazingly here in Gainesville with us this week. So we had a special opportunity to rope him in and talk to him about all things Linux. I'm really excited about it. Ross, thanks for joining us. And would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. I'm a longtime author in the open source world. Pretty much anything that has to do with the LPIC from LPI or the Linux Plus, I've worked with that. Done a lot of training. And also, one of the things I really like to focus on is the open source workforce. So getting folks into this workforce, when they're in it, skilling them up, trying to fill that workforce. And, we've talked about this pre-interview. There's a big gap there. So lots of work to do, and I like doing that.
Now, I do a lot of Linux training myself, and I've enjoyed the Linux operating system for a long, long time. And for many years, it was kind of a hobby, a side thing. And then over the last decade, it's gone from being a kind of a fringe technology to becoming you must know this technology. And it's been great for me because that skill set's become really useful. But you were highlighting how it's even more important now because of that gap that's being created by employees. So let's talk a little bit about that. So why is there so much demand for Linux training right now?
Well, number one, the thing that happened, I like to jokingly go back and say, for about 11 years, it was the year of the Linux desktop, right?
I think that was this year, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure. Yeah, and it'll be next year too. I love it when the industry tries to make those predictions, right? So it's like, it's going to be this next year. Well, sometimes it isn't. And what it was for the longest time was we were trying to beat the server market. We're trying to do everything we could in the Linux world to get distributions to the point, Red Hat, SUSE, Canonical, to where they were enterprise ready. And enterprise ready means it's got to have support. And so we achieved that. And all of a sudden, at one point, everybody looked around and kind of confused, like, hey, where'd the battle go? We won. So 70 plus, 80 plus % of the server market. And so now the whole thing is, everything runs on top of Linux. So you've got this hand that's Linux skills, and then you've got the cloud technologies, you've got, everything, Web 2.0, 3.0, all the stuff that fits on top of that. Well, a lot of people have come over to those cloud technologies without the benefit of the underlying foundation. And so one of the most popular things that we do is, get people into the workforce, but also take sysadmins who've been out there for years working with physical or even just standard virtualized servers and bring them into the DevOps engineer world. So that transition from sysadmin to DevOps engineer is a really important one, and it's one that I like to spend a lot of time on.
And I know one thing I've heard from a lot of people is that when they transition to the cloud, maybe on premises, maybe they were running all Windows Server or other technologies. And when you go to the cloud and you have things like auto scaling, where you can rapidly spin up tons of servers, licensing costs become pretty extreme.
Oh, yeah.
And so people were finding, wait, if I just deploy it on Linux, I can do that for free and I can still get support.
Right.
It was really the right solution. So now you have Windows admins that were having to learn it, and even admins of other platforms like FreeBSD. There were several people, which BSD is a great platform, but in the cloud, you see primarily support for the major Linux distros. So,
well, the thing that it's a juxtaposition of a bunch of things that happened all at once, and it's almost like if you look back at the history of Flickr, and Flickr used to be an online role-playing game that had a great screenshot sharing capability. Well, the advent of digital photos and the ability to upload things and all that, all of a sudden, Flickr became a photo sharing site and the preeminent one for decades, right? So when you get these inflection points, these places where, everybody's really upset about licensing and the cloud is now possible, and all of a sudden something that you never thought would happen happens. And so that's the part where Linux has made these quantum jumps forward because of those inflection points, right? Anybody who sat there and looked at their Microsoft licensing for the cloud and thought, gosh, I wish I could do something about this. All they need to do is a little research on Google or just go to one of the Linux shows, and they'll see, dozens of people that'll help you with that.
Now, this is what I'm sitting here kind of mulling over. We're moving to the cloud. What would you say the biggest issue that you found moving sysadmins to DevOps engineers positions? Not necessarily my role, but I've been asked to do many things and move throughout. What are the biggest hurdles that they have to overcome, whether it be from a training perspective or just like a mindset perspective that you've encountered?
Asking for a friend, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, totally not me. Totally not me.
Absolutely. Not a problem for me. The biggest problem I find is that folks will have this mismatch of let's use the cattle versus pets analogy. And so the servers that we've been used to using, there you go. That look. So
I'm interested to see where this goes.
Pet servers are the ones that are in the back room, and you've got a relationship with this thing, and it might be a love-hate relationship, and let's face it, often it is. The relationship you have with that server is a one-to-one relationship. You may even have a virtualization server back there running multiple lab images, etc. But you know where to go exactly when that thing goes down. And when it goes down, panic ensues. Grab the pizza, the Pepsi. We've got an all-nighter going on because we have to revive this server. Now, you may come to the situation where you realize it cannot be revived. Okay, so you go out back, you give it a nice burial, and you get the new one in, which you do your restore onto. But you still have a pet. Right? You know this thing by name, server one. In the cloud, and the new way of doing things, and increasingly the only way of doing things for small organizations and medium organizations, is you have cattle. You have herds of cattle. So what you do is you have all your YAML files that help you set up these servers, and you get it all scripted out, and you do your load up into your dev and your test, and then when it's ready, you put it into production. One of those goes down, doesn't matter. It's like being a rancher. You come out in the morning and one of the cows is gone. Well, I'll try to find it, but it's not going to stop the rest of the herd, right? So you don't have the same relationship with servers that are in the cloud and that are easily replaceable that you would with that one that's in the back room. That's a huge step to, how should we say, teach DevOps engineers not to care about servers. You care about them, but you care differently. And that's one of the ones. And so also some of the ways of people will get very confused about, wait a minute, this is all built from just a single text file? Well, I wouldn't call YAML just a text file, but it's a markup language. But the ability to spin up all aspects of your testing, dev, production, and everything else from exactly the same set of scripts and all the economies of scale that gives you, that's another one that takes a little bit of working them through. So.
And that's something that like Linux is really, really good at, because it's basically taken its configuration from text files for years versus Windows and some of the other OSs that are like Mac OS really, where they just they weren't built that way originally. They're kind of being retrofit now.
Right.
And so, you mentioned automation platforms or just automation in general. We are seeing this big drive for things like Ansible and
Chef and Puppet.
Puppet.
What's the one from Intel? I've forgotten the name now. So anyhow, there's a
Salt
couple
Stack.
of them.
Salt Stack is another one.
Salt Stack is a huge one right now. And that's not so much a Linux thing, but we are seeing that if you're deploying Linux on a large scale, that those are the technologies you need to learn. Have you making any inroads on those? Do you have a preference, or is that you stick mostly with the operating system?
I do stick a lot with the operating system, but the moment that you have to produce something over and over and over again, like in a training environment, you realize I have to do something. And so there's really two ways to do it. There's the image-based, which, let's look at Amazon, right? Amazon's AMIs is going to be an image-based way of doing this. And that's fine and all, but sometimes it takes a while to spool up, and other times it's not the most up-to-date. So that's the old, let's release, and then when something changes significantly, let's release again. Okay, well that's kind of the old way of doing things. There's sort of the building from YAML files, installing everything as you need it, kind of on an ad hoc basis. It seems, especially to older sysadmins and people who've been doing things in a more released way, it seems a little slapdash and kind of like, wow, we're really taking chances. But it works probably 99% of the time. And when it doesn't, it's usually because somebody updated something, and all you have to do is figure it out. And I always tell everybody, this, folks, is why we have test and dev environments. Don't put it into production unless it's been okay in test and dev. And the fact that I can just dedicate a certain portion of my infrastructure, or I should say a cloud provider's infrastructure, to doing that means I can spool it up, see if it works. If it does, great, it moves on. If not, fix it, iterate. And so just that ability to do that means that people don't have to spend nearly as much time doing installs and all the rest of it.
Now, one risk that I've experienced with Linux in general is that sometimes it can be a little too cutting edge, and that new technologies become available very, very quickly that take longer to come out in other platforms. And just as an example, we'll use containers, right? Yeah. Where Canonical put a ton of work into LXC, and then it was a great platform. You could create Linux containers, and it did a good job. But then Docker came in and just overnight kind of
seemingly,
cleaned out LXC's clock. So sometimes there's technologies that we don't necessarily want to dive into. So do you have any recommendations for people on like how they should identify when something is ready for them to actually start making that investment into it, or is it just kind of wait and see where the wind blows?
Well, as somebody once said to me years ago, as I was staring at a horse track, do you understand the concept of win, place, and show? And I'm like, no. So they explained it to me, and that is that you have to keep an eye on all these technologies. And at a certain point, there is that tipping moment where you realize, hey, this is going to be big. Sometimes it'll just come out of nowhere, but rarely do things really come out of nowhere. But as a sysadmin and as DevOps people, we tend to get a little focused on what we're doing, and so it's important, I think, go to conferences, watch videos of people who are doing interesting stuff, have that system and monitor up on the side there that has crazy YouTube videos from people you've never heard of playing. And I think that gives us a little bit of a canary in a coal mine moment. The other thing is whenever you see a technology that everybody's hopping on board of, just ask yourself how many times that's happened before, and when is that Docker going to swoop in out of nowhere and kill it off, right? And we've seen that happen over and over and over again. We could go back and talk about, Lotus and Ami Pro and WordPerfect and all these other things that have just been wiped off the earth, but they were the biggest thing ever at one point. So.
I'm always amazed when you find out like they still sell them, or you can get some decades old version.
Yeah.
They still sell it at full retail. Those are still out there. Now you mentioned video. I know you have been in the studio with IT Pro TV's Daniel Lowry this week, or at least yesterday. I didn't get a chance to see any of that content. What are you guys working on back there?
So we're doing something that's basically an introduction to Linux, getting started with Linux. And what it is it matches that CompTIA Linux Plus. Let's get you into this market. concept. And so the inestimable Mr. Stanger, who's the evangelist of CompTIA, and I are old friends, and we've worked on this, a lot in different parts of the industry. And it's just a joy to come in and work with somebody like Daniel and work with your crew. And it's a lot of fun. And I think it's really going to be helpful because they're little short vignettes, and they solve, we tell what the problem is, solve the situation, and then recap it. And so they're really easy to consume.
Are you covering not to do sudo rm-rf/ just so people don't get trolled on the internet? I've seen that all over the place. They're like, now how you fix your Linux machine is sudo rm-rf/ and everything is golden.
Yeah,
you're warning people.
Frees up a lot of disk space.
It does. It does. I mean, I don't.
We actually did cover that it was important to tab things out with autocomplete, as opposed to just go ahead and execute it and it'll be okay. In that asking for a friend moment, yes.
Yeah, asking for a friend moment. But I guess if we went to the cloud and it was cattle, then you're like, whatever, it's fine. Just go on about your.
I ruined it. It's okay. I'll just load it from the YAML files.
I'm kind of interested. Like some of your analogies make it seems like maybe you and I have similar backgrounds.
Probably,
because I was like cattle, horse tracks, show and win.
Yeah,
very interesting. So I'm gonna have to go check out some of those short vignettes just to see. Be like, I know that. So it's kind of fun.
I think it's important when you've been in the industry for a long time and such a long time. You come up with these analogies that are sometimes you stumble on them and other times you construct them. And I've told my classes for years, I say, well, my analogies, they'll be memorable. They might be slightly disturbing, but that's how you stay memorable. And when you have a system or a set of systems go down, it's memorable and it hurts sometimes. And so I tend to make fun of myself, in the situations I've had, and then let other people identify with that. I've seen people who do it the other way and, terrify their audiences, and I don't like that, but it really does help. If you can use your own experience and something terrible that happened to you and help somebody else not do that, I think that's a kindness.
We refer to those as RGEs, resume generating events.
Yes.
And
we were discussing they're also CLMs, career limiting moves. Yes.
I do love acronyms.
You want to learn from others' mistakes.
Retirement generation experience. Then your RGE.
There we go. All right. For those of you just tuning in, we are interviewing Ross Brunson, Linux training architect. And you had just mentioned Linux Plus, CompTIA's Linux Plus certification. Right. And I know we're creating content around that, but there have been some changes this year. For many, many years, Linux Plus and the LPIC 1 certification were tied together. That's now changing. So let's talk about that for a minute. How has that changed the Linux Plus content you're generating?
So let's go back just a little bit. The original Linux Plus was a great effort on the part of CompTIA to come up with a beginning Linux certification. Now, CompTIA tends to inhabit, and some people are, they don't understand this, but CompTIA inhabits that, how should we say, beginner or the introductory level. That's their skill. That's their goal. They've stated this forever. And so people are sometimes surprised when they don't see another level that's there. But it helps because CompTIA then partners with other organizations, which I think really, helps the organization and helps the industry itself. So they had that initial one, and then it didn't do as well as they wanted to. I think it was really timing. And just the fact that everybody else had something in the market and there wasn't enough market. And so they stopped doing that, but instead of not having something for Linux, they partnered with LPI. And so what they did is they white labeled LPI's two exams, their LPIC 1 certification. I happened to be in the Novell organization around that time, working as a data engineer and, what were we? Technical solutions engineer, they called us, which is basically an SE, sales engineer. So the fun thing was that watching all this, start the shifting happen, et cetera, I actually did some of the beta work with the original Linux Plus and gave my feedback. And I was actually happy when they did the deal with LPI because LPI already had a huge network. And so the thing that came out of that was a 2-for-1 deal. And so if you got your Linux Plus, then the LPI gave you the LPIC 1. Now, all of a sudden, instead of 5 points on my resume, I've got 10 points.
Yeah, and it was 3 for 1 at one point. Right? There was a third one, wasn't
Yes,
there?
it was, as a matter of fact.
Or somebody?
Yep. SUSE did that. The SUSE organization is, and I used to be the certification architect for SUSE. And so it was a fun thing to go to shows and say, hey, if you take it this way, you get 3 certifications, and you can actually get 4 if you do another fun thing. But now the organizations have gotten to the point where their goals don't necessarily point in the same directions. And it was time for CompTIA to do another run at this, and they did a great job.
You know, a nice thing about the LPI is Linux Plus lined up with LPIC 1, but with LPI you can continue on, and there's LPIC 2, and there's multiple LPIC 3s depending on the track you want to follow. So if you're getting started in Linux, we find that Linux Plus is a great place to start, but then if you're going to continue and specialize in it, the LPI certs are really, really effective.
You know, and I did a little series of videos when I joined LPI years ago. I worked for LPI as a membership director, and basically it meant everything. But I did a little series of videos of why get a certification and why do a vendor neutral. And I always recommend doing a vendor neutral distribution first. You know, it's like you have to install something. So pick an RPM, you know, do SUSE and Red Hat, or Fedora and OpenSUSE, or Arch and whatever, right? The key thing is that you learn both sides. And it used to be that people would say, well, I'm just going to take the Debian side of stuff. Really? You think you're going to work your entire career just on the Debian stuff? You're going to get an RPM-based project someday, you know, and vice versa. So a well-rounded sysadmin needs to have both of those sides, I really feel. And
I am by no means a sysadmin, but I you know, with the whole DevOps flaunting, I had previous positions where they go, you know what that means, Justin? We need you to deploy this. And that exact thing happened to me. I was very familiar with Ubuntu and Debian. And then our target was CentOS.
Ah.
And I was like, I don't know what any of this does. Key point is I had to deploy an Apache web server. Well, on Debian and Ubuntu, it's Apache 2. On CentOS, it's HTTPD.
Yeah.
And then, like, the configuration files are in different places. So that was like a 3-day extravaganza. Now, with that said, it kind of brings up, we have these tracks.
Right.
I'm not a sysadmin. I come from a software development background. If I were to get started to kind of level up myself, what is your recommendation as far as, you know, getting into the Linux world? Because if I'm doing development, there's a good chance I'm going to end up on a Linux web server.
Or you're gonna end up getting dropped into it.
Yeah.
You know, without your knowledge, like a lot of people. So Salesforce and some other really large organizations have for several years now been moving everybody into the Linux world. And it was a lot of fun to go and do these kind of Linux as a development platform classes for them. My recommendation is always this. Pick a vendor neutral certification. Let's say, for example, he says, with being here for CompTIA, let's pick the Linux Plus. It doesn't really matter which. It's like picking a day planner. You know, just pick one and use it, and go with it. And I find that the process of sitting down, you know, printing out the objectives, figuring out what you're studying, having your different resources, videos, books, the web, whatever it is, your test platform, you know, VMware, KVM, whatever. Dedicating yourself to working through a set of objectives or curriculum like that is automatically going to give you a set of skills if you're there and paying attention. But there's something organized about working through those objectives, and a lot of people they'll look at the objectives and they'll have this complaint, and the complaint is very simple. That's a lot of stuff. Well, yes, having a skill is a lot of stuff, but they'll say, well, I only work in 6 out of these 12 objectives. Back to that point about RPM and Debian, are you always going to just work on those 6 objectives? Or are you going to have another 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever? So the depth and breadth of being a sysadmin is huge. But once you learn it, then you can focus on the things that they give you on each one of those jobs.
I can fully attest to. I was like, this is what I'm going to be working. And then they were like, so that thing you were doing? Yeah, you're not doing that anymore. You need to go do this other thing. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. They're like, well, we need it by Thursday.
I thought you were certified.
So, I can fully attest that is at least my truth. So, whoopsie daisy.
But
I'm going to switch to morning talk show mode here because you mentioned organizing your training, and you have a book coming out soon, don't you?
Oh, man.
Thank you very much. Actually, you're right. I do. I've written several books, and it's all on the same general topic. So I try to stick in the world of Linux and, you know, the certification side of things. It's just something that I like to do. And having worked for different organizations in that capacity, it just seems like, why waste all those analogies and all those explanations? And I actually years ago did the first LPI boot camps in the U.S. And we did this off of a set of books. You go out and you find all the books and you look at them, and none of them were up to date. And it was terribly frustrating. And so I started putting together curriculum and coming up with something that I thought would make a good book. Well, it turns out when I talked to a publisher, it would. And so that was the exam QUE, the publisher. I think they're now part of Pearson. They took a chance on me, and so we did the Exam Cram 2 for the LPIC. And it was perfect because it was 3.5 years of my giving classes in a book, and it perfectly met my needs, and it seemed to meet the needs of a lot of people. So that was the first one, and I really kind of got hooked on the concept of, if you're doing something and you're getting a lot of information out of it, why not share it? Not just with the class, but with as many people as possible. Turns out I also shared some of my typos as well. So I got lots of good feedback about that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the internet, the biggest
And they're so
grammar
nice about
checker.
it, too, I'm
yeah,
sure.
they are, absolutely. Oh, hey, I noticed you had a typo.
You spelled this word wrong. I wish you would die.
Right. Yes, yeah.
Whoa, that escalated quickly. Are
3 times,
Are
yeah.
we on 4chan?
But
What happened?
but the fun thing with doing these is that it really does help folks. And I have a joke that if you're going to go take an exam, you need to drink a liter of water and eat a banana, right? So hydrate and get some niacin in your in your system, right? So I have this series of pictures that people have sent me of the liter of water, the banana, and the person with their certification. And they're like, I did it. I'm like, oh man, if I'd known you were going to do that, I'd have had something even more funny than that. So, but
that is an oddly specific set of advice.
it
You're
is.
like, all right, so a liter of water, a banana, you got to cluck like a chicken, and then you have
that's
to
right,
shake this maraca, and then boom, you're ready to go.
That's right. But it's been so gratifying to see people get something out of this. And just, sit down and they read the book and they come back and they notice the little Easter eggs and fun stuff you put in it. So I'll continue to do those. But I think a lot of our future is not really in the reading so much as in the speaking. And that's another great thing about coming down and seeing your folks here, and just this entire busy beehive of people who were producing content to help folks get ahead.
Yep. Now, if any of you are interested in checking out that book, it is available on Amazon and other places. Be careful if you go in there, because the exam has changed. This is the new Linux Plus XK0-004. The previous version is still available for sale. And it's not like Linux has changed that much between the exams, but you certainly want to make sure you're studying the right material. It is available for pre-order. Do you know about when that's going to launch?
Well, let's see. I'm just proofing Chapter 7 now, so I'd say about another month.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Chapter 7 out of 20 chapters.
Well, I've got half of it.
Out of 7.
I do want to give a nice shout out to my friend Bo Rothwell, who is the co-author of the book. Bo is just a machine as far as training and things like that, and he and I have collaborated on a number of things. So he's got about half of the book. I've got about half of the book, and so he's already finished with his, and I'm taking my time with mine.
Is this one of the, since you've written this new book, and I have to ask, is this one where if I count every third word in the book, is there going to be like a secret message to me about how to pass the exam? Or
Yes.
okay,
Where the Holy Grail is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
look, I found this pot of leprechaun's gold, and I got my Linux Plus. It was the craziest.
I'm telling you that. So 6 years from now, when you think you found the message, let me know.
Just so we're clear, I'm not going to go look for it.
Oh well,
And the message will just be a liter of water and a
that's
banana.
right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Shake
Yeah.
this maraca and dance like a chicken. And everything's good to go. That would be fun. I remember those infomercials.
But the cool thing about doing a book like that is that you think, wow, I put all this effort into this, and nobody really gets, you don't get rich from writing books. I can tell you that, not unless you read a whole boatload of them. But that gratification of having somebody send you an email and say, hey man, I got my certification, or even better, being at a show and you recognize somebody or they recognize you, and just hearing the story of somebody who was like one kid was a receptionist at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And that's the job he had. And he came to a class and he got the book. And 3 or 4 years later, I saw him at some big job fair, and he was a senior sysadmin. I was like, oh man, this is great. It just makes you feel like you've actually done something, so always good.
All right, Ross. Well, if any of our viewers want to, follow your activities, cyberstalk you, find out more about the book and the other things that you're working on, what's the best place for people to reach out to you?
You can hit me on the LinkedIn profile. It's simple, Ross Brunson. There's only 9 of me out there, of us, sorry. out there. I'm not the insurance guy from Salt Lake or the kid who's still in college.
It seems like there's an interesting story behind it. I'm not him.
That's
That's
his
not
backup
me.
career.
No, that's fine. I get the Doyle Brunson thing all the time. Do you play cards? No. Or rossbrunson.com. And so that's just a little blog that I throw up there, little things that I do. I do a lot of stuff on Facebook and Instagram. So if you want to, you can look me up on Instagram at Ross Brunson or Ross.Brunson, I think it is. So I post lots of fun stuff. I just do travel and things like that. So
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I really think that it's important for folks to improve themselves. And, a lot of organizations are going through this process of how do I incent my employees or my contractors or whoever to keep going. And so I think, getting a subscription to places like you run and the other places that are out there, doing a certification every 6 months, even just a small one or something like that, it shows progress. And nothing helps you in your career like actually getting progress, but your employer is going to like it. And you never know, you might get that really cool project when you buy a new company or they decide to do something with Linux. You could be the one.
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending the time with us. We appreciate it. I know the viewers out there
It's a
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
All right, and for you viewers out there, stay tuned because there is more Technado coming up next.
Are you a career changer or a budding tech pro who's looking to start their career in IT? I'm Wes Bryan, and along with my fellow IT Pro TV edutainer Cherokee Boos, we've just shot a new show just for you. Each week, we'll dive into topics to help you launch your career in tech. Watch how to get started in IT on YouTube now. Just head to youtube.com/IT Pro TV to watch and look for new episodes every Saturday at 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time.
All right, welcome back to Technado, and thanks for kicking me out for that interview.
We figured you would contribute nothing at all.
Yeah, no.
And we needed the chair.
Did anyone ask him his name?
No, I told him his name.
Yeah. It's like, you are now Ross Brunson.
I hope I got it right because he played it off.
My job has been taken. Yeah, was that the real Ross Brunson? We don't know. All right. I would like to point out that
We did find out during the interview there are 11 other Ross Brunsons, and one of them is an insurance salesman. Oddly that you say that.
Is insurance salesman?
No.
Because that would be crazy.
Yeah.
We didn't ask that. He might.
No.
He might.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if all other insurance salesmen are equal, why wouldn't you go with the one
Well,
that
there's
could confuse everyone?
There's that Discover Card commercial where they say, like, we treat you like you would treat you, and the lady calls on the phone
Like
and
you
it's
call
herself
yourself,
on the other
yeah.
end. Yeah, like that could be his
Why
life.
not? Yeah, exactly. All right. I would like to point out that I did get bingo, and it was pointed out to me by you all that I was missing the word container, and when we were talking about bathwater, as you do in a podcast, you asked what kind of containers they're in. So, I'm looking for containers in context.
Kubernetes.
But I'll take it. So
Justin and I got a big chuckle out of that because I purposefully used it out
you
of
noticed-
context.
you noticed-
Yeah, I was like, he said
So
it.
rewind. See if you see that. Yeah, I got cloud, container, free space, exploit, and encrypt.
Yeah, I
You're
was
one
real
away.
close. I needed Bitcoin, which is odd. We didn't talk about Bitcoin, or I missed it, or we all three missed it, right?
Yeah, and Don is, who knows, because Don just talks and doesn't.
Yeah, I threw my card away.
Yeah. He's worried about
I got
informing the public.
Yeah.
We're trying to get you to.
Peter and I are like,
Get him to say, get him to say this. Get him to say that. All right, hey, want to let you know about a couple things before we let you go. First of all, our webinars. We had a great webinar that we just recorded here, and it was on disaster planning. And not only can you still go back and see that because it'll be up in the archive here, actually by the end of the day today. It'll be over at itpro.tv/webinars. You can go and find that. But we're also going to do a follow up to that, right?
Sure.
You're going to do a follow-up to that. This is like you telling Ross his name. Don, you're going to do another webinar.
Yep. So our first webinar was disaster. Oh, when disaster strikes, right? And it's all about disaster planning when you're doing it right, when you're doing it ahead of time. So we're going to do a follow-up, which is disaster planning when you haven't done planning, or you've already done all your planning, you've already done all you could. What are some other things you might be able to think of that are last-minute things that can be achieved. And when I say last minute, I mean like Amazon Prime's not even going to work out.
Yeah.
Like what?
Like if the hurricane's coming, do I grab the server physically and run with it? What's the best thing? For
I
me
love
to
that
do?
idea. We should practice that.
Yeah.
That should be part of the web. You just grab it and run.
I'd like you to do the webinar, and we have Studio 4 here that has the server room as the background with glass, and I'd like to just see me in there just pulling things out,
Just pulling stuff from
like
racks.
listening to what do I do now? Okay, get this. All right, let's go.
And just remember, it's important when unloading a rack to unload from the bottom up. Right, that's the safe way.
Sure, get that,
Then we can
get
see
that
the rack
good
collapse
balance.
on him.
I think that gets confounded with the number of people who die from vending machines being tipped over on.
It's like you're basically playing Tetris with me remotely. Like whichever thing I tell him to pull out, if it falls on him, I win.
Hey, imagine Tetris, except like one of the pieces is soft and squishy.
Not
right?
Tetris. I meant to say Jenga. Yeah, Jenga. Like, oh, Jenga, I win.
For some reason, I got a little Peter, like, and when you drop down, it.
That sounds great. We'll get that game going. All right. We also have a live hacking webinar coming up. That one's first. That's on July 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and it is about Eternal Blue. So, and that's a basically an exploit that
So
red teamer can kind of take advantage of.
yes, Eternal Blue is one of the exploits that was leaked from the NSA toolkit back in the Vault 7 release. I forgot the code
that from
name they
Snowden?
had. No, not from Snowden. but,
Shadowbrookers.
We haven't said
yeah,
Snowden
Shadowbrookers.
in weeks, and we even took it off bingo. And if it came up today, I'd be really upset.
Could have happened. But it is, so it's kind of an older exploit, but many ransomware toolkits are using it to spread around. And we saw it last year with Petya and not Petya and all that. So what Daniel's going to be doing is showing us how Eternal Blue works, actually kind of running through that process. He's going to write his own exploit to take advantage of it and show how to pop a machine. And then I'll show how to protect it, which is actually super easy to protect, because most of the vendors have patched their systems at this point.
All right, and then when we're attacked by that exploit in the next week, we'll know
It's our own
that
fault.
we've trained an army against us. Perfect. But we'll have you to be able to help us fix that. All right. Also want to let you know finally about training from IT Pro TV. If you head over to go.itpro.tv/Technado, we have a coupon code for you there, Technado30. Get you 30% off the lifetime of your membership. As long as you keep it active, you continue to get that discount. We also have a demo request form there. If you have a team, want to find out about all the cool features we have for teams, you can check that out as well. That's all over at go.itpro.tv/Technado. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen, and it's nice to know now where I stand on the totem pole when a guest comes in.
Or where you don't stand.
Yeah.
Second,
out.
I thought it was last one in, as first one out, but
Yeah, we're not doing cues, man.
fair enough. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week right here on Technado.